and provide a brief background about yourself and why you're running to become our next U.S. representative.
Okay, well, thank you very much for inviting me, and I'm looking forward to this particular format. It's going to be fun. My name's Ben Streusand, and I am a candidate for the U.S. House of Representatives. I've been asked to address to you today a couple of things. First of all, why I decided to run. This congressional seat came up very suddenly and very unexpectedly. And as you may remember, the incumbent resigned from this office in order to run for another office on the very last day of the filing deadline. And I was very concerned as I sat in my office about who was going to represent us and what their values were going to be. And as I took a look at the field of candidates, I just decided that I didn't have a good, warm, fuzzy feeling about any of the candidates that had stepped forward, and whether or not any of those candidates represented what I consider to be the views of Texas conservatives. So what do I mean by that? Well, I mean, I was looking for someone that believed in small government constitutional conservatism, someone who would have the ability to articulate our values, somebody that was pro-life on social issues and for traditional marriage, but also was very understanding and had a good command of how the 21st century Republican Party viewed the issues and the urgency with which they addressed the problems, like, for example, repealing Obamacare, reducing the size and cost and scope of the federal government. And I felt like that with my background running AFP, the Texas Chair of Americans for Prosperity, for over a decade, which has been dedicated to reducing the size and cost and scope of the federal government and getting the federal government out of our lives, that I had the right to
The first few questions are actually a series of yes, no, or one-word response type questions. The questions will be at a fast pace, so there is no timer on these questions. What is your marital status?
Married.
Have you ran for public office before? If so, which office?
I'm married. My wife Kathy is here, and I ran
Have you
for
ran
U.S.
for Congress before?
Yes, U.S. Congress and CD-10 10 years ago.
If elected, where will your primary district office be located?
It will be within the district in the Clear Lake area.
How many times have you attended hearings in Washington, D.C.?
Many times as a congressional staffer
Do
about
you
30
favor
years
an
ago.
increase in the minimum wage?
No.
That was the last of the quick response questions. Question number 2, a 30-second response. Should a representative be required to actually live in the district a certain period of time prior to running for that office?
No, and the reason because the Constitution is very explicit on this question, and I believe that while it's not necessary to live in the district, if you want to run for the office, if you're an elected representative, you probably should live in the district, and if I'm sent to Washington, that's exactly what I will do. I'll also remind everybody that these districts were drawn by a 3-judge federal panel out of San Antonio because the Democrats didn't like the ones the legislature drew. So, yeah, I think while it's important to represent all the interests of the district, it's not necessary to live there
Question number 3,
to run.
a 30-second response. Will you support a constitutional amendment to require that laws apply equally to citizens and members of Congress?
I thought we already have that in the Constitution. It's just ignored. I mean, we have equal protection under the laws, but it's simply ignored. Now, we got to be very careful about reopening the Constitution for amendments, because you're not necessarily going to get what you think you are.
Yep.
Question number 4, a 30-second response.
Yes and yes.
Have you read your party's platform, and do you support it?
Yes. And yes.
Question number 5, a 1-minute response. What is your overall thought on the Department of Homeland Security?
Yuck. You know, I gotta say that it's just like everything in Washington. It starts out with good intentions, you know, to protect the homeland, but it's become a massive bureaucracy There's too many tentacles. Department of Homeland Security is invading our lives. The TSA is a perfect example. We don't need this tremendous invasion. We don't need the NSA listening to our phone calls and reading our emails. There's such a thing as warrants and wiretaps. The FISA courts need to be eliminated or restricted. We need to bring it all out in the public. And the Department of Homeland Security, as far as I'm concerned, it should be a target for elimination.
Question number 6, a 30-second response. What role should the Department of Homeland Security have as it relates to cybersecurity?
I think that cybersecurity is best handled by the Department of Defense. I think the Homeland Security Department is redundant. And I think that it was mainly done cosmetically and put together as a part of cosmetics to make everybody feel better from the what happened after 9/11. So I just simply eliminating it and go back to having things siloed. As long as we allow people to talk to each other, I think we'll be in good shape.
Question number 7, a 30-second response. What are your thoughts of having drones watching our borders and citizens? And should local law enforcement be allowed to utilize drones without probable cause?
I think drones are a good idea on the border, but I don't want to see them used anywhere else within mainland United States. I don't think they should have permission to use drones without a warrant. And that's a clear violation of the Constitution, a violation of everyone's privacy rights.
Question number 8, a 30-second response. What are your thoughts on the war on drugs?
It hasn't worked very well, but I'm against legalization of any of the current drugs that are illegal because I believe it'll just foster increased use and it will lead a lot of our youth to get hooked on other types of drugs. So we have to find a way of addressing the problem. I really don't have a good answer for this one. Everything we've tried hasn't worked very well, but I don't think legalization is the right decision either.
Question number 9, a 30-second response. Is government spending out of control? If so, what should be done to reduce it?
Yeah, this is an issue. I think it's fairly simple. You have appropriation bills that are supposed to be run through the House and the Senate. Harry Reid decided a while back he wasn't going to go for regular order in the Senate, so as a result, they haven't had appropriations bills. We need to ensure that they put appropriations bills on the floor and not fund the government with continuing resolutions, and that would allow members to vote against the appropriations bills.
Question number 10, a 30-second response. What is the first piece of legislation you will personally offer?
Well, I could say repeal Obamacare, but I think everybody's already tried that about 100 times. I would say eliminate the funding for Obamacare, and I think we could do a much better job of finding a better Speaker of the House. I think part of the problem is the Republican leadership and the tactics that they're employing. We got to have the right person in there, so finding the right guy instead of John Boehner, I think that's the best first decision that needs to be made, and that's what we need to do.
Question number 11, a 30-second response. On which committee do you feel you are best qualified to serve? Please explain.
I think I'd like to serve on both financial institutions because I'm a 30-year veteran of the banking industry, and what I'd like to do is get the federal government out of our lives and out of our businesses, because it doesn't really matter what business you're in. You could be a rancher or a rice farmer or a small businessman like me. You're just sick of the federal government telling you what to do and writing regulations that you have to follow. So I say that, and I'd like to be on foreign affairs so I can vote against all the money.
Question number 12, a 1-minute response. Please share your thoughts on amnesty for the estimated 12.5 million illegals in the United States.
I'm against it. And I'll never support a pathway to citizenship for anyone that came to this country illegally.
Closing comment. A 1-minute response. You
Well,
will have 1 minute to offer closing comments.
Well, this has been interesting and different, so I hope I answered most of your questions. I know I have to earn your vote, and I think that when you're looking at who to send to represent you in Washington, remember this, and that is that you got to send somebody up there that represents your values and also has the ability to articulate it to other members of Congress. And I think that my experience in advocating conservative values, both statewide with AFP and on the Voice of Texas, most people know where I stand on most of the issues. If you have a question, we got the answers written down for you, and I'll be happy to answer whatever questions you put to me after this event. And thank you very much. Ken, great.
We would like to thank you for your participation.